Hello, Star Trek fans, and welcome to ReBingeIT. This is the ReBinge Star Trek Voyager podcast. My name is Kim.
And my name is James.
And we're watching Star Trek Voyager from the beginning, one episode at a time. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we are on Season 1, Episode 9, Emanations. This episode aired March 13th, 1995. Before we start on this one, anything to say about last week's episode, ex post facto?
The Tuvok mystery episode.
I feel like it's an example of an episode, not the podcast, obviously, the podcast was perfect, but the episode of Star Trek, it's like not our best.
Dare I say it, it is filler.
Felt a bit lazy.
The plotline borrowed so much from other stories, I don't think they had to work terribly hard on that one.
Yeah, felt like we'd seen it before. Not very complicated, not very interesting, not much of the outcome. Yeah.
It's a perfect syndication episode. You don't need to know anything beforehand or anything after.
Yeah, or anything after. Well, let's move on to Emanations.
I have an alternative name for this episode.
Okay.
You could have jazzed things up a lot if you'd called it Asteroid of the Dead. Or Planetoid of Death. I personally think Asteroid of the Dead would have been a better name.
Yeah, something like that would have been better than Emanations. I mean, ultimately, Emanations make sense within the context of the things that happen and the things that the aliens talk about, but something more dramatic would have been cool.
Although it sounds like just some kind of medical condition.
Yeah, I would have liked Dead Asteroid, something like that. Tuvok on his Logic podcast, I think he would have agreed with us.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I have the notes this week, so should we get started?
I think we should.
In the cold open, the Voyager team are excited, thinking they've discovered a new element inside the rings of a D-class planet, and we're moving in to check it out. And there is so much technobabble here that it is just mind-boggling. Chakotay, B'Elanna, and Harry beam down to an asteroid within the rings and start walking around, looking for, I don't know, signs of the element. I don't quite know how we thought we were going to see it, but anyway, that's what we're doing.
But before we continue, maybe it's time for a little bit of unwanted education.
Uh-oh. Is this a sticky note at the Smithsonian Museum?
It could be. So they talk about a stable transuranic element. This is an element after uranium. And this actually isn't science fiction. This is science speculation, because apparently there's been modeling which describe an island of super heavy elements at the very upper end of the periodic table, which have really long half-lives, so are actually stable. So this is, theoretically, actually a real thing. The downside is, it's also predicted that all these elements would be radioactive. So not ideal, but scientifically interesting.
No, but 300 years in the future might be okay.
Yeah. Oh, they could coat them with some kind of radiation-absorbing shield.
Well, yeah, I remember that planet that blew up and we just went down there. No problem. No big deal.
That's right, yeah.
So, I don't know. We seem to be immune to most radioactive events.
Good point. This I thought was kind of interesting.
Okay. It's a bit nerdy, but I'll let you have it.
Unwanted education.
Yeah, we haven't talked about that yet on this podcast. We did talk about it on ReBinge Deep Space Nine, I believe, where when we went to the Smithsonian Science Museum in Washington, D.C., James kept correcting all the plaques, and I just told him to stop telling me about it and just get some sticky notes and leave the sticky notes for someone who cared. I can't be bothered to learn when I'm on vacation.
You just point out one event wasn't necessarily exactly as they put it down. Never hear the last of it.
So, no, you will never hear the last of it. Because that was a long time ago. And yes, I frequently tell James, just get your sticky notes. Anyway, the funniest part of this episode happens pretty quickly when Chakotay walks through what looks like a giant spider web. And his line is, "What the hell is this?" I've never related Chakotay more.
It's pretty funny when you watch this episode back and realize what that is.
Yes. Ultimately, B'Elanna says it's some kind of biopolymer residue, which we will learn more about later in this episode. But suffice it to say, it's not a spider web. And then the creepy factor of the episode kicks in when we discover that the caves of the asteroid are actually a tomb. We see many dead bodies that appear to be wrapped in what looks like white gauze, very similar to the non-spiderweb spider web that we were just talking about.
Yeah.
It's exceedingly creepy, and Harry looks disappointed that it's the dead bodies that are emanating this thing that they thought they had discovered.
Yeah, it's a cave full of bodies.
Yeah, so he is already sad that his scientific discovery is maybe a failure. And we cue the theme song. Well, now Chakotay reports to Janeway that they found 19 bodies so far in various stages of decomposition. They don't know where the bodies are coming from, but it seems like the element that they were reading is emanating from the bodies.
Yeah.
Chakotay wants to leave the bodies alone, but Harry expresses his opinion that this is an opportunity to learn about this new race. Janeway agrees with Chakotay that they should be respectful, and Chakotay recommends they don't use tricorders, they just use their eyes. Okay.
Shall I go into this now?
Sure.
Okay. First of all, they don't know anything about this place that they are, these people or anything. So while I understand the concerns about digging up a graveyard, which, that's a little bit iffy, let's face it.
Yeah.
I think he's making a bit of a leap. How, without any examination, would you be sure that this isn't just the dumping grounds of the victims of something?
Right, like a serial killer.
Right. I mean, is this ritualized murder?
Yeah.
Would it be that kind of civilization? Plus, I don't think a non-damaging analysis by scanning them would be violating anything. Because as long as you're not actually damaging them, interfering with them, walking through them and brushing them away, which is basically what happened earlier.
Yeah.
I don't think that would be violating any of these people's cultural norms, especially when you're not planning on actually disturbing them. You're going to leave it intact.
Yeah.
And here's the amusing hypocrisy. Oh, we'll just use our eyes. Well, you have lights on.
Yeah. The light could be causing some kind of problem. And honestly, just your presence.
Right.
Yeah, and the things that are emanating off of you. Mm-hmm.
Moisture from the human bodies.
Yeah.
Shedding skin. Any of these things.
Yeah.
You're taking precautions, and your idea is you're going to leave after you've done these scans or whatever. You want to be respectful to this. But at the same time, what if this is the dumping ground of a galactic serial killer?
Well, I agree with the sort of immediate response that, look, this is actually sort of an active burial site. I agree with that because they said there had been a body left there just within the last few hours.
Right.
So clearly, worst case, I guess, is it's a dumping ground for a serial killer. But maybe best case scenario, where at the very least we are in an active cemetery.
Right, yeah.
And so I do get like, okay, maybe we should get out of here. That, to me, would have been the right thing to do. And then you could have done your scanning from Voyager.
Yeah.
But we chose to stay and keep looking around. And didn't you feel like they were trying to do this stereotypical thing with Chakotay as, again, the Native American character where he's the one who's going to be concerned about burial grounds?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And we talked about this a few times, but it's really hard for us to know if what they're doing with the character is valid because their one consultant was a fraud.
Right.
I mean, it's tough because it may have been valid, but
yes,
it's hard to take it seriously when you know how we got here.
But I would think as well, you could put this as completely a norm of Starfleet, of having a regulation against, you don't go grave robbing.
Yeah. Because he tells a story about taking something from another site when he was younger.
Right.
So it's like, that's a bad thing.
Right. And you would think he could quote a Starfleet regulation if we believe this is an active burial ground. This is something of cultural importance.
Right. So let's get out of here.
Yeah.
Let's not traipse around. But instead, we traipse around, which is what causes the entire problem.
Right.
Well, after this Chakotay saying, just use your eyes, B'Elanna pretty quickly is like, I've learned everything I can. It's just a bunch of naked dead people.
Yeah.
Oh, I loved that. Oh, it was tremendous.
Oh, shout out to B'Elanna and the Klingons, though, where she says, they just dispose of the corpse the most efficient means possible.
Well, it's because Chakotay's making a bunch of leaps about what he sees, right?
Yeah.
With the way that the bodies are positioned. And she's like, the Klingons also believe in an afterlife, but we don't think the body is involved.
Yeah, and the Bajorans, too.
Yeah, but there's no Bajoran on this mission to tell them that. But yes, we covered that in Deep Space Nine. Yeah,
it's the Cardassians
exactly.
who care about the bodies and the deification of the dead kind of thing.
Well, even though Chakotay has a bunch of ideas about the beliefs and rituals of these people just based on, a few bodies that he's seen, B'Elanna remains unimpressed. And then there's a bright light, and Harry reports a dimensional distortion is forming, some kind of subspace vacuole.
So he can detect and tell this is a dimensional portal.
Sure, it comes up on the tricorder. Actually, it's a little red button that comes up.
Beep,
Yeah.
beep, beep. Dimensional. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not a subspace pocket. It's not a warp conduit. This is dimensional.
It's dimensional. Yeah. I do wish I'd kept a some kind of counter in this episode because they say some kind of so many times. And every time I laugh, but I should have kept a counter.
It did actually get pretty funny.
Chakotay calls for an emergency beam out, and back on Voyager, Seska is trying to get them back, but she has some trouble with the subspace distortions. Very common problem.
Yep.
She does manage to get B'Elanna and Chakotay, but instead of Harry, she has a dead body. Uh-oh.
That was kind of awesome.
This is where we should have cued the theme song, I think. Much more dramatic.
Right.
Yeah. Well, Janeway, by the way, Janeway on the bridge, her bun is a bit smaller again this week. I think we're getting a handle on the bun.
Yeah.
She is clearly annoyed that we've lost Harry yet again. But Seska says Harry must have been pulled into the vacuole. And it seems the body they now have is very recently dead. So B'Elanna suggests that they revive her because there's still some brain activity. Chakotay doesn't like it, but he agrees that they might be able to learn something. So they beam to sickbay.
Well, he says they cannot interfere with this woman's natural process of death. Oh, okay. Well, in that case, just shut off the doctor, give up with sickbay, because how many other races have you interfered with their natural process of death?
Yeah, these rules are chaos. There's no doubt. I mean, we've talked about that on the previous podcast where it's like the Prime Directive only matters if it's a race that we don't like.
Oh, that's true.
If it's a race that we like, then we do whatever we want.
And how do you come to that leap of natural process? This could have just been victim number 297.
I know, Chakotay. Yeah, we're in a little bit of nonsense at this point.
Yeah.
Now we go to an alien in a gold costume with some really big forehead ridges and a dramatically wide nose, performing some sort of funeral ceremony over a big kind of pod or a chamber. Yeah. And he talks about how death is the end of this life, but is also the beginning of a new journey. And he says Patera, who's apparently the person in this pod, will now thrive in the next emanation. Everyone around sort of says this happy prayer, and then suddenly there is a knocking from inside the pod, and they open it up thinking, oh my God, Patera isn't really dead, but instead they find Harry.
Yes. You know, that's got to be embarrassing at a funeral.
And everyone is a little bit shocked.
Yeah.
Like, oops, we took the wrong pod. I don't know where this guy came from.
I mean, the worst thing I heard of at a funeral was when the Undertaker dropped his cell phone into the actual grave during an interment.
Yeah, that's not good.
Actual happening with my family.
Yeah, that is really awful.
This guy's costume is really good.
Yeah, it's nice. Yeah.
You know, I've complained about DS9 sort of went away from the elaborate costumes. I feel Voyager is kind of embracing it.
Yeah, this is old school Star Trek we got going on.
Right.
And all of the costumes in this episode, in this alien race, they're all really nice.
Yeah.
I mean, they're all slightly different. Because I always like to make fun of when we go to a planet and every single person wears exactly the same thing. And that's not true here. Everybody does actually have a different outfit.
Right. He's got very formal robes, and the next guy we see a little bit later on has slightly less formal, but still very elegant robes.
Right. Well, after this dramatic ad break of finding Harry in the pod, we go to two new characters on the alien planet. And the woman is telling the man that she's so proud of him. And he says it's his last gift to her and the children. And they say that they'll miss each other, but they know that they'll see each other in the next emanation. And then they say their goodbyes and the woman leaves. Just then, the guy in gold from the earlier scene enters the next room with Harry, and they tell Harry to just lie down. And Hatil, who is the guy who said goodbye to his wife a minute ago, is wondering who Harry is. The guy in the gold says he came from the next emanation, and they've called for the thanatologist, which is a word I didn't know and had to look up, to help figure out what's happened. A thanatologist is a scientist who studies the dead.
We were both convinced that wasn't a real word.
Yeah, we thought it was made up. We thought it was a Star Trek made-up word.
Yeah.
Well, they leave Hatil and Harry alone now, and of course the two of them start chatting. Harry has no idea how he ended up in that pod. He says they found some dead bodies on an asteroid, and then he ended up here. And Hatil is immediately concerned that Harry saw dead bodies. This is not what the next emanation is supposed to look like.
Oh, wait a minute. What about these dead bodies?
Yeah, he's like, well, I'm sorry, what? Yeah. Well, in comes the thanatologist, Dr. Neria, and he looks shook, I have to say. Like, his hair is sort of crazy, and he's got a shocked look on his face.
Yes.
Just based on seeing Harry.
I was expecting him to say to the priest, have you been drinking again?
Yeah, really. And this guy can't hide. This is Deep Throat from the X-Files, this actor. I mean, he's got a lot of makeup on, but he can't hide. He's still recognizable. And he was also on Time's Arrow, the very famous TNG episode, where he played the Mark Twain character.
Oh.
So he's been around.
You're great with the TNG characters.
Oh, yeah. Anyway, Harry says he's from Earth and he's human. Teal wants to know what's going on, but Dr. Neria tells him to go back to his little room and chill out. He tells Harry his people are called the Vhnori, and this is their homeworld. Harry asks about the rings around his planet, but Dr. Neria says there are no rings around our planet.
Yeah.
So Harry realizes he's been somehow transported to a completely different location.
Yeah, he's somewhere else.
Dr. Neria says he's returned from the next emanation, another dimension, and he says Harry has returned from the afterlife. Harry's got a lot of looks in this episode where he's like, oh no.
This just keeps getting worse.
Yeah.
You know, I'm starting to wonder if Harry is the Mars O'Brien. What terrible things can we do to Harry this week?
Well, that's what I mean at the beginning where Janeway's like, Harry again? I am starting to feel like maybe he is the guy who's always getting tortured. Back to Voyager, and the doctor has cured the dead woman's cancer and resuscitated her. Turns out the dead bodies aren't really covered in something. It's actually a natural byproduct of their body's tissue, which is excreted from the species' skin.
Yeah.
So that means the spider webs on the asteroid that they were walking through were actually dead bodies.
Yes. Oh, the way the doctor delivers that to Chakotay.
Yes.
Priceless.
And Chakotay is disturbed by that. You can see the look on his face, but there's really not much to be done now.
Oh.
Well, I mean, maybe take a shower. I don't know. It's creepy.
You were tramping through dead bodies.
I was reading about today, somebody on Threads, I think it was Will Wheaton's wife actually, was talking about she felt something on her head. She'd just been outside and then she was like thinking it was a leaf in her hair and it turned out it was a spider. And then she just can't stop the feeling of the spiders. I mean, everybody who's ever had a spider on their head understands what she means. But that's what I think in this situation, too. You'd be like, I have a dead body. I walked through a dead body.
Oh, dear.
Well, Patera, the previously dead Vhnori woman, is understandably freaked out. She was expecting to see her brother in this afterlife, but this is not what she had in mind. Eventually, they have to sedate her when she starts panicking about the next emanation.
Well, that went well, didn't it?
At the same time, well, they're all standing over her looking down. I mean, she's freaking out.
Yeah.
Back on the alien planet, Harry and the doctor are looking at the so-called cenotaph, which is the pod that Harry arrived in. Turns out they put a person in it just before they die, and when the spatial rupture appears, they activate the cenotaph, which ends the person's life.
Kills them.
Allowing the body to be taken into the next emanation. Yeah, it kills them.
So it's really a murder booth.
Yeah, it's a murder booth.
We call it the cenotaph because murder booth didn't test well.
Cenotaph sounds scientific and historical, but really we're just killing off people.
Oh, yeah.
Harry asks how they create the subspace vacuole, but Dr. Mark Twain here tells him that they are natural occurrences that happen every 6 hours. He asks Harry about the dead bodies that Harry mentioned, as he suddenly is concerned that their afterlife consists of just decomposing on an asteroid, which is not what they had in mind.
Yeah, not ideal if your worldview is based on an afterlife.
Harry finally realizes he's not really qualified for this conversation, but I mean, it's too late. He's already said too much. He really needs to learn to chill when he runs into new aliens.
Right.
Like, just stick with your name and rank. Why are you saying other things?
If we think about this, Harry is the most inexperienced junior officer. So he is kind of feeling his way. But at the same time, might you expect that Harry would be super by the book?
Follow the book. Yeah, I would have expected that.
So soon as he got there, it would have been, I can only tell you my name and where I'm from. And even then, if you tell them where you're from, although they do seem to be cognizant that there are other races.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's true. That didn't seem to panic him.
Yeah, because you could see a situation if you ended up there and they hadn't made first contact with other aliens. It's like, not only is our afterlife ruined, but we're not the only people in the universe.
Maybe if we think about Caretaker, that is what Harry did, I think, when he ended up on the Ocampo planet. I think he did just give, like, his name and rank. But for some reason here, he, like, spills his guts right out of the gate. Maybe he's disoriented from the weird transport that happened. I mean, we'll give him the benefit of the doubt.
We'll give him a pass on that one of being interdimensionally transported does kind of freak you out.
Right. Dr. Neria wants a complete bioanalysis of Harry. Harry protests because he really wants to get back to his ship. But Dr. Neria says, oh no, you're our first glimpse into the afterlife, so we're going to be doing some alien probing. Uh-oh.
Harry's going to be going, again?
Oh, man. Why are aliens always probing me?
Yeah, just a few episodes ago, they were sticking needles on me.
Oh my gosh, that's right. Trying to inseminate him, remember?
That's still a truly horrible vision, thank you, Kim.
I mean, I just watched the episode. I didn't do it. Back on the Voyager bridge, Chakotay says they've detected over 200,000 alien bodies on the asteroids. He says a subspace vacuole appears every 2 hours and then a body appears.
I'm prepared to admit at this point that I don't think it's a serial killer.
Probably not. That's quite a killer. The doctor calls to say Patera is awake again and she seems much calmer. Maybe we've given her some Xanax or something. So Janeway chats with Patera, trying to keep her calm, but the woman is mostly concerned about what Janeway knows about the afterlife. Janeway, of course, knows nothing about it beyond the bodies they found. Patera says we're supposed to evolve into a higher level of consciousness when we die, and all of our questions are supposed to be answered. But Janeway says just because she doesn't have the answers, that doesn't mean there aren't any answers. Yeah. But Patera is inconsolable because she thought she'd see her brother again when she died. But of course, you're not dead, lady. That's the trouble. So this is very confusing for everyone. And also, all we really care about is finding Harry.
That seems fair.
Patera wonders what she's supposed to do now, and Kes offers to walk her around the ship and give her some lunch, which Janeway thinks is a great idea. But suddenly, the ship vibrates with something, and we learn a subspace vacuole is forming in engineering. And unfortunately, a body is left behind.
Oh, that was awesome.
And B'Elanna is not amused to find this in her place of work. Like, oh, great. Yeah. Now they're here.
Clean up aisle 5.
Back to the alien planet, and Hatil is having second thoughts about getting into the Tomb of Death, and his wife seems really annoyed.
Yeah.
She's like, I already started my new life. You can't come back to the house now.
I'm dating already.
But the trouble is, Hatil is now doubting the higher level of consciousness, so he's not as eager to go through with the ritual.
Yes.
He says he's scared, but she assures him that his father is waiting for him in the next emanation. And then she leaves, assuming he's going to go through with the plan.
Yeah.
On her way out the door, she gives Harry a dirty look and tells him to stay away from her husband.
Yeah, Harry is spreading space atheism, I think.
Yeah, he's like, great, how did I get into this mess? I was just trying to find a new element. Now we learn that Hatil's family decided he should just die because he's become a burden to them.
He's got a bit of a limp. Time to get rid of him.
Yeah, we see that he's wearing a brace on one of his legs, but we don't know exactly what else is making him a burden. And this is where, I don't know, I already felt like this episode was depressing, but it got so much worse from here.
Oh, yeah.
Harry's trying to get out of this hole he's dug by saying he has no idea what happens to the Vhnori when they die. He says he doesn't even know what happens to his own people when they die. Hatil says his people think of death as just another stage of their existence. He says some people are even eager to die when they feel depressed or lonely in this life. They simply move on to the next.
Wow. Yeah, exactly.
Do you remember the Deep Space Nine episode, The Quickening?
Yes.
Which is the most depressing episode in all of Star Trek history.
And one of my favorites.
Many people love it, not me. One of my absolute least favorites, most depressing episodes. At this point, I was like, well, this episode is giving The Quickening a run for its money.
Yes. Well, earlier when he said he'd become a burden to his family, taking up their time.
Know.
There was a family meeting and it was agreed he should move on.
Yeah,
wow.
They took a vote and were like, nah, we're done taking care of this guy.
And remember, the family did it out of love. You're a bit of a burden. We've decided to have you put down.
Awful.
Yeah.
And Harry is trying to hide his disgust at this whole story, but the guy said the family was really happy for him to move on to the next emanation.
Yeah.
Yeah, because now you're not their problem anymore.
Right.
But Hatil does admit that he's now terrified with the appearance of Harry, and he's having real doubts.
Kind of feel for this guy.
I know, and he's really good. This actor's quite good. Back to Voyager, and bodies are getting deposited all over the ship, which is a bit unsettling for the crew.
Yes, another body.
This is the point where Janeway notices that each body releases some kind of neural energy that is passed through the hull of the ship and out into the rings around the planet.
Yes.
The energy's frequency is identical to the ambient radiation in the asteroid field. B'Elanna is complaining now because she thinks the vacuoles are going to cause us to lose antimatter containment, which of course is catastrophic.
Yeah, just what you want, a warp core breach.
Janeway has noticed it keeps happening close to the warp core, so she orders the ship to move away from the rings to a safe distance, and she tells B'Elanna to figure out how to protect the warp core.
I think this is the only appearance of Tuvok in the episode as well.
Oh, he's also, when they find Harry later, he's also there, but he doesn't have a lot to do or say in this episode. Now in the mess hall, Kes is telling the alien that she likes to just stare out the window at the stars.
You've only got 9 years of life, woman. You don't have time to just sit there and stare out the window. You should be doing stuff.
Right. So these two are drinking something very peculiar. I think it's supposed to be like cookies or cinnamon sticks or something in some kind of a drink. But it literally looks like beef jerky stuck in cranberry juice. What are we doing?
It probably is. It was probably one of the set people had to make something and was just like, we'll stuff some things in a glass, make it look exotic.
It is so funny. Well, Patera says in the next emanation, they're supposed to see beautiful sights, colors, and lights, and they would see them with new eyes and a new understanding. But now she's like, everyone's just dead. And we have completely ruined this woman's faith.
Well, it's also sad that she's been brainwashed into this particular view and presented with something else. She has absolutely no coping mechanism.
Yeah, she can't cope with anything.
Man, did they ever need a counselor.
But also the thing that she has been convinced of might be true. We don't know.
That is a good point.
I mean, it would be weird to think you were going into the afterlife and you woke up on Voyager. That would be weird.
Yeah.
Kes talks about her own people believing in a soul, but Patera says they don't believe in any kind of spirit. They're supposed to travel into the next emanation as themselves with arms and legs and living bodies. Well, then that's not going to work for Hatil. His body is already broken.
Yeah. You get to enjoy your crippling disability for all eternity.
Yeah, this one's hard to buy into.
This is not going to be a lot of fun.
Forever. She starts breaking down again. She wants to go home, and Kes is like, let's get Janeway.
Oh, it's kind of sad.
This is where I said in my notes that we really need a counselor or someone who could try and reassure her rather than what it is that they're doing. I don't know. They just keep trying to talk her out of being sad. They're not really helping.
Yeah, maybe they could train a counselor. Maybe there's somebody on the ship who had some training in it or did it as an elective when they were at Starfleet Academy.
Yeah.
That could be trained to, work in that role.
Maybe there's somebody on the Maquis crew, which would be funny.
Right.
I feel like we keep trying to solve her problem scientifically, but this has nothing to do with the crisis that she's having. But I guess we're just not equipped for this kind of a problem.
Well, I think that's a big part of this episode.
It is, yeah.
They're trying to show the difference between a purely scientific-based approach and people with a religious faith. I mean, Deep Space Nine did that brilliantly, but it had whole seasons to cover that.
Right. So Janeway tells Patera that the plan is to get her home and get Harry back. B'Elanna has an idea. She suggests that they recreate the transporter accident, sending Patera through with a subspace transponder so they can get a lock on Harry. Patera is like, yeah, send me now. And Janeway tells her this is just an idea. There's no guarantee it will work. But Patera says she's already been dead once today and she's prepared to die again. She says she'll take the risk to get home. So Janeway is like, great, let's get you out of here. And once again, I question how quickly we latch onto something that has potentially deadly consequences. But I mean, we only have 46 minutes. So we got to keep moving.
Remember how they were beaming across that test transport to make sure it worked and backwards and forwards to carry on. And this
now we
time
don't
it's
have time
just
for
like,
that.
I got half an idea. Let's just go for it.
I've got half an idea and a volunteer. What else do I need?
Oh, man.
We head back near the rings and we get Patera onto the transporter pad. Janeway wishes her well, but that is short-lived.
Don't get attached.
As we beam her into the vacuole, it goes very badly, very quickly, and she appears back on the transporter dead, with no brain activity. And now she's covered in the white web-like substance again. I don't understand what killed her. Exactly. Because it's the pod that kills them.
Right.
So I don't know. I don't quite know what we did here, but it was terrible.
Okay. Headcanon time.
Okay.
I postulate the actual transit through those vacuoles is actually the thing that kills them.
Yeah.
That alien race, when they travel through the vacuoles, it kills them.
Because it really is some afterlife process.
Yes. They really are shedding their mortal form.
Okay. I honestly, that's crazy, but I will accept it.
A little bit hand wavy, I'll give you that. I also think it's kind of funny how they just killed her, and they do seem to be a little bit cavalier about it.
They're like, oh, beam her down to the asteroid. We're done with her.
Yeah, she's dead. It's like how all those people died in episode 1. It was just like, never mention them.
Oh, well.
Happens.
Now we're down to only 2 hours to find Harry, and we beam Patera's body away with no counseling for Kes or anyone. And Kes very quietly says to her she hopes she finds her afterlife. Me too.
Oh, Kes is definitely the voice of empathy.
She is. Back to the nose aliens and Harry, and they want to do a more detailed bioanalysis of Harry, but they need to move him to a different facility.
More probing.
Harry doesn't want to move. He wants access to one of the cenotaphs to try and rescue himself, but Dr. Neria says,
Death pod.
No way. You're already causing problems in our society, so we need to get you out of here. And then he leaves, and Harry is annoyed. He finds Hatil behind him, covering himself in a ceremonial shroud. And Harry's like, so your family decides you should just die, and now you have to wrap yourself in your own death shroud. I think Harry mostly wants out of here. He doesn't want to be a part of this depressing society.
You know, it'd just be more trouble for the family.
Yeah.
And
he's such a burden.
Yeah, he's such a burden.
Now they got to wrap him in this thing. Oh, my God. I'm surprised she was able to press the button to kill him. Hatil expresses his doubts again, saying he's considered just disappearing into the mountains where he has some friends who would help him. But he says his family would worry. Oh, that's so sad. So Harry hatches an absolutely brilliant plan. He says, let me put on the shroud and you disappear into the mountains. He says this way the family will get their ritual and Hatil gets what he wants.
Yeah.
So Hatil starts unwrapping the shroud. He's into this plan immediately.
Well, clearly he doesn't want to die just because the family decided it would be better for them.
Yeah, and I've been in those situations where you just need a little tiny push in a different direction where you're like, oh yeah, let's go this way. Well, Hatil reminds Harry that the cenotaph is going to kill him, but Harry is hoping if he gets beamed onto Voyager quickly enough, the doctor should be able to revive him.
Yeah.
That's a bit of a stretch.
Harry, I feel, is maybe clutching at straws a little here. I think he's really kind of desperate, I think is the thing.
Yeah. I mean, this is a risk he's willing to take. He says this is likely his only chance to get home. I guess from his point of view, he doesn't know everything that's going on Voyager, and he sees the society as being backwards, and he doesn't really want to be a part of it. And he's also, I think, worried that they're going to kill him.
Oh, yeah. They don't seem to have much of a value on life.
No, because you can just go to the next life.
Yeah.
But that next life isn't going to work for Harry, because he doesn't excrete the spiderweb thing, so...
It is kind of interesting here, the parallel with Hatil and Harry. Harry wants to get home and live, and Hatil just wants to live.
He just wants to live. Now we have the nasty family all gathered to say goodbye to Hatil, who is really Harry with his face completely covered in this death shroud.
$10 says right after this, they go and have a fight about the will.
Oh, probably. Did nobody notice how this guy does not have the same super skinny frame that Hatil has? I thought that was funny. I guess we're just ready to move on. We don't care.
I was going to say, do you think they care?
Apparently not.
They've already rented his room out, sold his stuff off. His wife's dating again. The last thing they want is him back.
Yeah, I mean, we close the tomb, press the button, and everybody seems happy to be rid of this guy.
Such a burden.
Inside the box, Harry rips the shroud off his face, and when the wife presses the button, Harry gets zapped and dies.
As I said, the murder booth.
And back on Voyager, another alien female body appears, and B'Elanna says we have to get out of here. We're at high risk. Janeway reluctantly agrees, but before she has the chance to issue the order, another body appears, and this time it's Harry. They beam him directly to sickbay, and Janeway runs to sickbay where the doctor manages to save him.
Oh man, this was great. This scene, B'Elanna recommends leaving, and Janeway is just absolutely stone cold. She calls it and says, very well.
I don't agree that she's stone cold. She does kind of sigh and look around a bit, but she's like, yeah, we have to save the ship. We can't just stay here until we all die.
Yes. And the music here, when she does that, it's like a slow reprise of the theme music. Really good use of the music.
Right.
But her ability to, I mean, that's what makes her the captain. Okay, we've done everything we could. We just got to move on. Harry's a burden. We're leaving him behind.
I have in my notes for later when we get to overanalysis where there's so many things about this episode that make the show different from Deep Space Nine. And that's a good example of the use of the theme song. Yes. I mean, how many times did we use the theme song in Deep Space Nine in dramatic moments? Right. Just not what we did on TNG or here on Voyager or in Picard or any of the other shows. Later, Janeway finds Harry having some dinner alone and staring out the window. Harry claims he's ready to return to duty, but Janeway says he should take a few more days. She says he should reflect on what's happened, and she looks wistfully out of the window and says, when you get older, you realize you wish you'd spent more time absorbing what was happening around you. She says it's easy to become jaded and treat the extraordinary like it's just another day at the office. She thinks he should live with the experience a bit longer. He thanks her, and then he talks about how the Vhnori people all think they know what happens in their afterlife, but they just get sent to these asteroids to decay.
Asteroids of death.
Janeway says, I wouldn't be so sure of that if I were you. That neural energy their bodies release becomes part of the ambient electromagnetic field surrounding the planet. Our readings indicate the energy is unusually dynamic, meaning there's a bunch of different ones inside of it. Harry says, so do you think they do have an afterlife and the energy field is where they exist on a higher level of consciousness? But she doesn't know. She says she isn't certain, but she is certain that what we don't know about death is far greater than what we do know. And then she pats Harry on the arm and leaves him to reflect. The end.
Good captain ending as well.
Yeah, I would say a great captain ending. Okay, so, overanalysis.
Well, I think the first really big thing that we need to talk about is the absolute chaos Voyager is leaving in its wake.
Yeah, that's one of my overanalysis points too. Like, what have we done? But Harry's fine, so off we go.
So last week, we threw one planet's entire legal system into chaos. This week, it's this society's religious order has now been thrown into chaos. Now Hatil has gone up into the mountains, and what happens if he founds a new religion? He could turn everything on the planet, everything just goes to hell.
Yeah.
It's world-changing.
It is, or potentially. And what's so interesting about it is we sort of think at the end here that their view of the afterlife might be true.
Right.
And what did we do but introduce doubt into their world? And we did it in, a potentially catastrophic way because even the religious people were having doubts in that moment. And I don't know with Hatil, I don't know how he's going to make it up into the mountains, but he doesn't seem like the kind who will start up a new religion. But it's certainly possible that the story about him might spread.
Well, there were so many witnesses who saw Harry come back.
Right.
I mean, just the family.
Yeah, that whole family.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So there's another piece of chaos they've left in their wake.
I suppose the theologians could come up with some excuses for Harry, right? Maybe indicating that he was just a test of their faith.
Oh, there you go. That's a good one.
Yeah. I mean, because he appeared and then he disappeared. They don't know what happened to him because he just disappeared. And I guess also many people could just think it was a hoax.
It was space atheists trying to hurt their belief. The whole thing was a hoax.
Yeah.
The only way to fix this is to burn everyone involved at the stake.
Oh, my. From Janeway's perspective, I guess she doesn't see what they've done to the planet. But her plan was to save this woman's life and send her back through. I mean, that was thoughtless as well. That also could have been catastrophic.
Oh, that's true.
How is that not interfering with the Prime Directive?
That's a good point. Wow, that really is interfering with the Prime Directive there.
Yeah, because they used advanced medical techniques that this planet doesn't seem to have. And then they were just going to make her reappear.
After she's been beamed out.
And what's she going to do? She's going to tell them she was on a spaceship in another dimension and where, all there were dead bodies on the asteroid. I mean, oh my gosh. Yeah, this is bad. Yeah. We have caused some trouble on this planet. We don't care, though, because Harry's okay.
Right.
And we got what we needed, and we're out of there.
The name Voyager is a curse on 400 worlds.
I think it might be.
Well, leading on from something you said there, my next point is, I have so many questions about the Vhnori. What is their level of technology?
Yeah, we don't know.
They seem to understand other races exist. They know what an asteroid is. But the Voyager doctor seemed to have no problem curing this woman. So, do these people shun medicine?
Well, it might not be that, though.
Yeah.
Because, remember, we got the speech about how they decide to die because they want to move on.
Oh.
So she may have decided to shun treatment because she wanted to see her brother.
Yeah. Oh, and she was a burden to the family when she was sick.
Maybe she was a burden to her family.
They decided it was time for her to go.
She couldn't keep a job.
Yeah.
Such a pain, that woman. She would go into hysterics all the time.
That could be a good point, that it's not that they don't have medical technology. It's that the society's so death-obsessed that they'd rather than dealing with something, we just go, just let them die.
And we might only be seeing one religion. That doesn't mean there aren't others.
Oh, is this your point about There can't only be one religion on Bajor.
Yeah. I mean, Chakotay said there were 200,000 bodies, which isn't that many for every 2 hours for people dying on a whole planet.
Yeah.
Like, it wouldn't take that long to accumulate 200,000. But I guess at the same time, the ones who had decomposed and just turned into the spider webs, we don't know how many of those there were. So I did have the thought that maybe this was just one particular
Cult.
sect of a religion or cult. Yeah.
One particular death cult.
Yeah. You know, it is possible, right? I mean, what was that cult called up in Rancho Santa Fe?
Oh, Heaven's Gate.
Yeah, maybe this is Heaven's Gate.
Oh, interesting theory.
Because we didn't see anything else.
Yeah.
We didn't see the rest of the planet. We just saw that. We never left that room. We were only in that one room the entire time.
With Harry spreading doubts.
Yeah. Let's hope all we did was break up a cult.
That would be a net positive, yeah.
Yeah.
Next thing, interdimensional travel and portals, or vacuoles. Do you think, is this another dimension? Were they actually jumping dimensionally?
I don't know. Because why didn't we stop for a minute and wonder if we could use these vacuoles somehow to get back to the Alpha Quadrant?
Right. I mean,
yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, this would seem like a bigger discovery.
Yeah.
If you found a way to jump to parallels or alternatives this easily. And how did the tricorder, like you said, does it have a red light in it that goes, oh, interdimensional?
Yeah. Well, how did we on Deep Space Nine endlessly just beam to the Mirrorverse all the time? I mean, I don't know.
Oh, because they used transporters for that, and there was a method of doing it.
Yeah.
The mirror universe is just one of the potentials. Parallels is probably, it might be my favorite TNG episode. That's a pretty good one.
Yeah, it's a great one.
And there we saw literally hundreds of alternatives with different versions of the Enterprise.
Well, and this is the first time we went to a different dimension and there were actually different people there.
Yeah.
Normally we just find ourselves.
Yeah, so this should be a huge deal for Voyager.
Yeah.
If you could jump dimensions, couldn't you just then spend a lot of time jumping to alternative Voyagers until you find one where it's like, oh yeah, we've got the next thing beyond transwarp drive. We can get you to Earth in 5 minutes.
Right.
We'll fly you to Earth, jumped back to your parallel, you're home.
Yeah, it does feel like we missed talking about something.
Yeah, I guess it was just purely a device. One of those throwaways for, we need to tell a story, so we're going to make this up and forget about it.
Yeah, maybe.
Like the Culminator from last week.
I mean, it couldn't have been that radically different in terms of technology because that woman in Patera, she wasn't at all bothered about being on a spaceship.
Right. So this must be a relatively technologically advanced race.
Yeah.
And I think that wraps up my overanalysis. Over to you.
Well, we covered my 2 first points about what have we done to the planet.
What have we done?
So my third point is that while this episode was quite depressing in spots, at least Janeway gives us some sort of hope at the end that maybe that whole planet isn't completely delusional and that their vision of the afterlife is actually kind of what happens. The only thing maybe they don't have right is that it's not the body, it's the neural energy. So there is that sort of spirit or soul that they're not paying attention to.
So what you're saying is Harry has just ruined Patil's afterlife.
Well, no, because eventually it's going to get him no matter what. But at the end of the quickening, we just learn that everything is terrible and always will be terrible. At least here, Janeway gives us some indication that something could be happening with the Vhnori, and ultimately we just don't know enough about it. So it's less depressing than the quickening. That's what I would say about it.
I would dispute your summary of the quickening and would recommend people watch the episode.
Yes, make your own decisions about how horrible it is.
And listen to our podcast on it. I dispute Kim's ending.
No, there's a thing at the end where Bashir is talking to the main woman, and I swear to you that the decision that they make together is that everything is just awful and everyone's just going to die anyway.
I thought it had a more upbeat ending.
There is nothing upbeat in that episode. But anyway, we're not here to talk about that. My final overanalysis is, I mentioned this, or at least hinted at this a little earlier, but this is another example here of where the show feels more like TNG than Deep Space Nine.
Right.
I mean, we watched Deep Space Nine for the last 3.5 years, so I got very used to the feeling and the atmosphere of that show and how the episodes went, right? But this, to me, is 100% back in the TNG type of feel.
Right.
It's the way music is used, not just how they reuse the theme song, but the way that they use music. Like, for example, in the scene where they bring Harry back to life, they're all like staring down at him. And the music is very dramatic and they're all looking at each other. And then Harry wakes up and, oh, what a relief. Everything is fine again.
Yeah.
It's like we have these kind of lighthearted moments, like Chakotay walking through the spider web, right? And then we have these devastating moments, like where Harry is hearing the story about Hatil and his family and how they're just like, you're too much of a burden, you gotta go.
Yeah.
Then at the end, everything is sort of back to fine so that we can reset and go to the next episode. And that's very much what The Next Gen was. And that is very much not what Deep Space Nine is.
Yes.
That's my whole point. Do you have anything else about that you want to say?
Oh, I don't disagree. Yeah, this could be a TNG episode.
I think what I'm trying to say is that Deep Space Nine is an entirely different show, and the people who couldn't get into it because they felt like it wasn't Star Trek, I think their point is valid. It's not that it isn't Star Trek, but it's not like what we've seen before. It's a different show with a different feeling, and it might not work for you. And the same is absolutely true for Discovery. It's a different type of show with a different atmosphere, and it might not work for you. And then they bring Strange New Worlds in, and it's very similar to the older kind of shows. And hey, that might be what works for you.
Oh, yeah.
But they're still all Star Trek.
And Lower Decks, I know there's people who don't like Lower Decks because of its feel.
Oh, ridiculous. And Star Trek Prodigy, just another example. Star Trek Prodigy is very much like Voyager, I would say.
Yeah.
So it's, to me, very Trekky. And people were all freaked out because the first couple episodes were like Star Wars or something else. Well, just give it a chance.
I thought that was a really good idea. Give those early episodes the same feel as the Star Wars cartoons, the Clone Wars.
You're trying to get a new audience.
Yeah, of Rebels, of The Bad Batch. The feel of those shows introducing a new version of Star Trek. And I think it was by the third episode, it's like, this is Trek.
Yeah, by the third episode, we were learning about the Federation and Starfleet.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that goes a long way, I think, to explaining why you got into Voyager from the outset.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's go to Janeway's leadership corner. I don't have a lot, but I do have a couple of things. And one is, again, we're just jumping into things with maybe not enough caution or discussion. And it was just like, screw this alien woman. You know, she already died once today. Let's save Harry. That just seemed a little off.
I love your line. We got a theory and we got a test subject.
We got a volunteer. Boom. So that was maybe not the greatest example of leadership.
Yeah.
But I would say that at the very end, Janeway really did show her value as a leader. And Harry is quite lucky to have someone who's willing to share that wisdom with him and just have a conversation with him, you know, give him some sort of counseling at the end. And that's not something you always get from your leader or from your manager at the very least, or, you know, in this case, from your superior officer. So I did think her little speech at the end, well, it was probably really put there to make all of us feel better because we don't like our normal Trek episodes to be super depressing.
Yeah.
I did find the value in it in terms of Harry really having an advantage over others because he's got a great captain who's willing to sit down and talk to him.
Well, I think something that's coming out here is the captain who is approachable with Janeway versus the depiction of a captain through Picard. And maybe it's a bit early to say this, but Janeway is giving the feeling of family.
Yeah. Yep.
Much more than Picard. And I guess the situations are so very different. This has to be a different captain. And I think Janeway's skill here is seeing her being able to adjust to this new environment, this new normal.
I do think it would have been a mistake for Janeway to be like Picard.
Yes.
Then it would have just felt repetitive. I'm sure they were struggling too to try to figure out, well, the fact that we see her hair constantly changing tells me that they were struggling because she's a woman. And they're just like, oh, we want to make sure it's the perfect character that we put up here, which is dumb. Just make her a normal person.
Yeah.
But I'm sure there was some sort of struggle about exactly how tough she should be, exactly how confident she should be. But I think what's important is that she wasn't exactly like Picard, but she's also not too far on the other side. Like they didn't make her, you know, all the way on the other side so that she's really weepy and emotional all the time.
Right.
Instead, they just sort of made her Kirk, which is fine with me.
I would make my point. Had Janeway spent the next 5 years in the Alpha Quadrant and this hadn't happened, she would be in line for a bigger ship. Maybe even the Enterprise.
I still find that depressing. All right, let's jump to rating. Thumbs up, thumbs down, or neutral. What is your rating?
Okay, I'm giving it a thumbs up, and here's why. It was a really interesting concept episode. Not just because of the idea of this race having an afterlife in the rings of this planet with some kind of neural energy.
Yeah.
But I think the idea of alien races having wildly different social norms. Oh, you're a burden. You need to be disposed of. No pressure, but the family thinks it's time to die. But, at the end of the day, some societal norms are barbaric.
Yeah.
I found it an interesting concept and thought-provoking, and that makes a great Star Trek episode.
Okay, well, about halfway through this episode, I was like, ugh, this episode is the quickening. My least favorite non-Ferengi episode of Deep Space Nine. So grim, and I felt like no hope at the end. But it wasn't that. They did sprinkle some hope into the story, and Janeway gave this great speech at the end, and that sort of saved it for me. So
yeah,
I'll give it a thumbs up too, but I don't think I need to watch it again. I think I'm good. 2 times, check. And I would also say that I didn't remember this episode in the slightest. I didn't remember anything about it. I didn't remember the story. I didn't remember the end. You'd think I would remember those scenes where they find all those dead bodies, but I don't remember it at all. So either I just put it out of my mind because I found it depressing, or it had no impact on me. So I will just say thumbs up, moving on.
Off to the next episode. Well, it's good that we're both back to thumbs up on episodes.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, that wraps up episode 9. Come back next week for episode 10. In the meantime, if you'd like to send us your own overanalysis on this or any episode, or if you just want to say something nice, you can email us at ReBingeIT@gmail.com. We are also on the social medias at ReBingeIT. That includes YouTube. And if you want to connect with us on the Facebook group, we are at facebook.com/groups/Star Trek TTM podcasts.
Thanks for joining us on the ReBinge Star Trek Voyager podcast.
That's it for me.
And that's it from me.